I'd like to call this January 21st, 2021 meeting of the Strongsville Board of Education to order. Mr. Anagnostou, would you take the roll?
Mrs. Bissell?
Mrs. Bissell is not in attendance. She asked me to let everyone know that as part of our responsible restart, we all need to be responsible, and she is currently quarantining.
Mrs. Salee?
Here.
Mr. Micko?
Here?
Mr. Roberts?
Here.
Mrs. Hausum?
Here.
Would you please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America
and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Next on our agenda is executive session. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Motion by Mr. Roberts, second by Mrs. Hausum. Any discussion? George, would you take the roll?
State the reason.
Oh, my bad. To consider the employment of a public employee or official.
Mr. Roberts?
Yes.
Mrs. Hausum?
Yes.
Mrs. Salee?
Yes.
And Mr. Micko?
Yes. And we will enter into executive session at 6:03, and we will resume approximately at 7 p.m. Thank you. We are going to resume public session at 7:15 PM. Next on our agenda is district goals. Our district goals remain academic achievement and growth, brain hiccuping, community engagement, and what's the middle one?
Financial prudence.
Financial prudence. Academic achievement and growth, financial prudence, and community engagement. And besides my memory, they're all challenged right now, but we will continue to meet the challenge. Next on the agenda is public comment. I do not see any public comment. Any last-minute takers? Hearing none. Dr. Ryba, do we have any recognition today?
No recognitions today.
Number 8, approval of minutes. We have a number of them, the October 16th, October 22nd, October 29th, November 5th, November 19th, and December 16th Board of Education meetings. All video and audio recordings are a permanent part of the minutes, and they're available on our website. Do I have a motion for approval of minutes?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Motion by Mr. Roberts, second by Mrs. Hausum. Any discussion? I will publicly thank Dawn for doing a great job of making sure our minutes are always accurate and up to date and sending us to them early, if not on time, for review.
And she does a great job with them.
Mr. Anagnostou, take the roll.
Mr. Roberts,
Yes.
Mrs. Hausum,
Yes.
Ms. Salee,
Yes.
Mr. Miko.
Yes, and the motion carries. George, you're up with the treasurer's report.
Thank you, Mr. Miko. For your items for consideration tonight, I have the financial report for month ending November 30th, 2020, which can be found in Exhibit A. Also, the financial report for month ending December 31st, 2020, which can be found in Exhibit B. And then also at your desks, and it's also posted to the website, I do have my monthly supplemental report that goes to the month-end December financial report that I wanted to review with the board and the community. So overall, how we're trending for the fiscal year. Currently, revenues are trending about $430,000 favorable compared to the forecast. Expenditures are about 1.3 under the forecast, which is about 1.7%. Overall, the combination of these two would net an impact of $1.8 million. I'll detail in the upcoming pages what makes up those differences. Overall, the December cash balance of the two is 1.8 million higher than forecasted, and also 13.7 million higher than December of last year, which is contributed to the additional levy that was passed. For the month, revenues collected for December were 1.7 million compared to 1.3 million last year, which revenues are up by 500,000 compared to last year. What makes up the differences is state funding is down due to the state foundation reductions due to the COVID-19 pandemic, but it was coupled with due to a one-time increase of $900,000 due to a workers' comp premium refund of $900,000. And then also, there's a decrease in interest revenue, decrease in kindergarten tuition, which is all related to the pandemic. So the reason it's up is mainly because of the workers' comp one-time payment. Through the year, how we're trending compared to fiscal year to date from December of last year to December of this year. Revenues are up by $4.6 million, and again, majority of it is in local taxes because of the new levy that went into effect at the beginning of the calendar year. And then state revenues is down by $500,000 compared to last year because of the reduction, and then other revenues is up primarily because of the $900,000 workers' comp that was received in December, and then also there was another workers' comp premium refund that was received in November as well. So we received altogether $1.1 million in workers' comp refunds for this year, which helped offset some of the decreased revenue that we had. And then how we're trending year to date For revenues compared to the forecast, as mentioned, we're trending about $430,000 higher, of which $115,000 is state foundation. Although I did mention the foundation formula was reduced, we did receive a one-time payment at the end of the year. At the end of each fiscal year, they reconcile our deductions based on student counts once it's finalized. So we received an $88,000 payment for for reconciliation of fiscal year 20, and then also our preschool special education aid. Once they got this year's numbers, it increased by $32,000. And then other revenues, it's about $300,000 higher than the forecast, and it's primarily due to those property tax settlements that we agreed to after the forecast was presented. For expenditures, comparing December of last year to December of this year, expenditures are about $99,000 higher compared to last December. It's a combination of salaries were down for the month, but they're not for the year. The reason they're down for the month was last year we paid our fall supplemental sports in one lump sum payment, where this year we're expanding them over a course of the season. And then also for December purchase services this year were higher of purchase services last year. It's a combination of timing, invoices are due, but also we had we made a solo payment for the solo program in December, and then also our charter school and other tuition payments are higher compared to last year as well. Fiscal year to date, it's actually $43,000 lower compared to last December fiscal year to date. And it's a combination of salaries and benefits are $500,000 lower, purchase services are $315,000 lower, and other expenditures are $260,000 lower. And the decrease in purchase service and other materials, it relates to the pandemic. As we've been having remote days, there's certain contract services that we saved dollars on that we didn't need. Nursing services, when they weren't in school, we weren't paying for those. Contracted transportation services, and then we received grant funding with CARES and the coronavirus relief funds that we were able to offset some charges to those grant funds as well. So overall, how expenditures are trending. As mentioned, expenditures are trending about $1.4 million or 1.78% lower than forecasted. We are seeing savings in the forecast in salaries and benefits, primarily due to some budget positions that we had for SAS Connects that we didn't need once enrollment came in, that were budgeted as placeholders, and also some benefits savings when we budget for a position, we budget the full benefits, and some of the newer employees they didn't take our benefits. So we noticed savings there. And then purchase services, we saw it's trending at a savings based on the remote learning days, and then also we made placeholders for Solo and SES Connects, which is coming lower based on the enrollment count. So we're saving money from those placeholders as well. As the school year continues, expenditures fluctuate, so we'll keep an eye on them, but right now we're trending about 1.78% under budget. So any questions on the monthly financial?
I'll just say I like the new software. I think it makes a really nice report, and
Thanks.
Hopefully it's less work and it's more automatic.
Yeah, it's more automatic, and it's good insight right there. Right, a lot of good charts and dashboards right away available. And then item C, invoice order approval for two invoices that were received after the fact that were over $3,000. And there's going to be an item D. I want to bring up food service discussion. We mentioned at the board retreat that at the December meeting, I made a presentation to the board about beginning the RFP process for food service, as this year was in our 5th year of the contract, where by law we have to go out to bid. Last Thursday, we received notice from the Ohio Department of Education that the USDA offered a waiver due to the pandemic, that any districts that's in their final year of the contract this year can do a 1-year rollover with with the company, all we need to do is let the Ohio Department of Education know. When we discussed about it at the retreat, it was suggested, can we do the RFP, and if we don't like the results, to take the waiver. I researched it with ODE, contacted someone down there, and the feedback was, no, we need to choose one or the other. The reason for that is, if we go out for the process, then there's no need for the waiver. They recommended to take the waiver because of one of the reasons the waiver was there is companies are going to bid higher for their cost this year, just because they're losing revenue as well. So it'll set up districts it'll put districts in worse positions than if they would wait potentially a year from now. So my recommendation is to hold off on the RFP and take the waiver, turn it over for the board if there's consensus or any discussion.
Any questions for George? No, I think that's I mean, we've had discussions privately before. I think that's the wisest course of action. In any of these kinds of contract situations, you want to have as much certainty as possible. And with the pandemic making everything as uncertain as possible, I think it's wise for us to take advantage of the one-year waiver. I do hope that Chartwells will still be here for our meeting, because I think it's important that we get a report on how things are going in light of the pandemic and just in general on what their plans are. So I think you have direction.
Cool. Yeah, and Chartwells will be here next meeting to present.
Great.
Thank you. That concludes my report.
Thank you, George. Dr. Ryba, you're up.
Thank you, Mr. Micko. As we start with our responsible restart, I thought it was time that everybody's tired of hearing me every meeting talk about what we're doing and where we're going, so nobody better to hear from our building leaders. So what the goal for today is we're halfway through, right? We did the first semester feedback survey. We did that last meeting, but wanted to get building perspective from our leaders as to, I asked them two questions. What are some bright spots? What are some positives that have come from all that we've learned throughout the pandemic? And then what are some just current realities and challenges we face moving forward? So, we're gonna start off with Megan Surso, who's our preschool coordinator. She's gonna come up. I've got some slides as they talk, but they've all been given 2 to 3 minutes to share these highlights. If we can do this in 2 to 3 minutes a person, it would be a miracle, because they've got so many wonderful things to share about what's going on in their building. So Megan, it's all yours.
All right, thank you. So before I get started on my slides, just from a show of hands, how many of you have experienced anxiety during the pandemic? Okay, how many of you have children who have experienced anxiety? Right? I think that's like kind of the buzzword that's going around right now, and something that our staff has really noticed in our youngest learners, who we like to call our mini Mustangs. So something that I was reading in a recent article is that our young children really feel that anxiety in the household, but they may not be able to process it in the same way that the adults do. We have to remember the change that's happened for them. Maybe mom and dad are working at home, all the siblings are at home on the computer, maybe someone lost their job. There's a lot of stress that happens in a household, especially for young children. And like adults, kids are social beings. I have 3 young children. I have a preschooler myself. We have to remember that their whole life has been changed. There's no more play dates. There's no more going to the playground. Sometimes there's no school. There's no daycare. So a lot of the things in their lives cause a lot of anxiety, and that's something that our staff really noticed, especially with switching back and forth into this framework. Can I go to the next one? So something that we really worked hard on the Professional Development Day in December was focusing on how do we increase the social emotional awareness and learning in our youngest learners. Yes, academics are important, cover your ears, Cameron and Jenny, but you're never gonna get there unless you address the anxiety and the emotional stuff that they're going through, especially in young children. So what we've really tried to do is try to make it as normal as possible, even though their teachers are coming through a computer, coming through a screen, because we know that their social emotional development really provides that foundation, and it's the foundational skill for everything in their life, their happiness and their well-being. So our teachers have done socially distanced greetings, visits. Now that we're back in session, it's a little bit easier. They're still going on their Google Meets. They have virtual pajama parties, movie parties. We did our book fair thanks to our PTA virtually. We did read-alouds with the teachers. And my favorite picture that I have up there in the bottom right corner is one of our teachers record stories of herself reading. And that's the only way that this particular child will go to bed at night, is if he gets to hear Miss Terry reading his bedtime story. So we've really worked hard to try to maintain a sense of normalcy, even though we know everything right now, especially for our youngest learners, is not normal. One of the challenges that we're facing with the in-person learning, I want everybody back, but the challenge that we have is keeping masks on 3 to 5-year-olds is very tricky. Luckily, they've gotten a lot better at it lately, and keeping them socially distanced. Because we know the biggest part of our preschool program is that peer modeling and getting kids to play together and interact. So we've really kind of had to think outside the box with how we can do that in a socially distanced and safe environment.
Thank you,
Thanks.
Megan.
Good evening. So I'm going to focus a little bit on, we know that COVID's brought a lot of pitfalls, but we've also learned so much. And so I wanted to focus a little bit tonight on what we've learned and how we've kind of taken our learning and our teaching and redefined it and reimagined it in a different way. And so as we've learned, as we've did different platforms, all of our conversations have been framed around this question. How do we develop the skills and mindsets of learners and empower them to find their place in the world? And so what we've done is some of our teachers have kind of shifted their thinking and said, how do we take this from teacher-led learning to putting the ownership on the kids? Because they've been forced to do that. They go home for remote learning. They have to go on their computer and read something and report back to their teacher. So how do we do that in a way that's going to help our kids? So how we've answered that question is creating some student-led progression boards. And so what you see here is a couple of examples of K-5, what some teachers have put together, and the response from the kids is amazing. And so what you're looking at here, the top is kindergarten. And so they have to go through these progression boards and progress through some activities, some text. They have to meet with their teacher. They have formative assessments to show what their level of understanding is. And so in kindergarten, they were learning about countries and the holidays they celebrate. And they had to walk through this progression board, and they had to check in with their teacher. The second one down at the bottom, the important book, that's our first grade, and they're learning a very rigorous standard main idea, especially for our youngest learners. And they have done this progression board where they're reading a story. They can either listen to it, they can see it. Sometimes the teacher reads to them. And then they have to show what they know from what they've done on their own through either a flip grid or a graphic organizer. So that's one thing they're doing. The other example here is 5th grade, and they are working on text structure, which is not a extremely riveting standard and topic for 5th graders to go through. So one of our 5th grade teachers created this where they have to pick text. So they got a lot of student choice. They're picking text, they're figuring out what they want to research and read about, and then they have to in some way show the teachers what they know. So if you go to the next one, in all these progression boards, it incorporates so many skills that our kids need. They're critically thinking, they're problem solving on their own. They're doing the things that we used to do where we would have one text and maybe a couple different ways to show what they know. Now kids they get to read, they get to listen to podcasts to learn information, they're interviewing people to learn information, and so it's not just one way to do it, and it's not one way to show them how they've learned it. And so you can see here on the slide, through this kind of progression board and this kind of teaching and learning, not only are they getting consistent feedback from their teacher and to each other, they're collaborating, they have student choice, there's a ton of different assessment in there, so the teachers can actually use time effectively in their classroom to be able to pull some small groups socially distanced, but be able to use what they have learned, learn what their kids have mastered to be able to guide their instruction the following day. So a lot of great stuff going. The feedback has been tremendous. Kindergarten, she started it before Christmas just to see what the kids would do, and we were in remote. So it was a challenge, but she said it was the best learning experience. And we got, parents had emailed and called and said, what are you doing? My student or my child is so motivated. They're so excited to learn. So even through that remote learning, we had really good feedback. The feedback from our kids is pure excitement. They're motivated. They'll say, I'm actually having fun and learning at the same time. So they're really enjoying it. And then the teachers have really, they're saying that they have more time to get to kids and address their needs because their kids are going here, doing their progression board, and they have time to just make sure they're focusing on their kids. So that's our bright spot. A challenge that we're having, kind of along with what Megan said, the idea of wearing masks, I mean, they're really good at wearing masks. They're being really resilient. But when we're talking about, at Chapman, we have a lot of students who have diverse needs. And so sometimes they need to see how, like our speech pathologists and some of our classrooms, they need to see what that looks like if we're teaching phonics. So it's really hard. I was in a classroom today and they were trying to work with sounds. And she kind of had to lift her mask a little bit so they could hear. So that's one of the challenges that we're facing. So.
Thank you, Amy.
All right, good evening, everyone. First off, I'm going to focus on our students and staff here at Kinsner Elementary. And going into this year, I think I could probably speak for every administrator in the building, we were a little nervous about how our students and our staff would respond to these protocols and WIP mask mandates and how they would really react. But I'm here to say that I'm really pleased and really proud of our students and staff about their resilience and how they have molded and adapted and have worn their masks. I mean, to be honest, I've probably had to mention maybe once a week to a student just to adjust their mask in the hallway. And it's actually led to lower referrals in my office, which is actually makes my life a little bit easier. Here's just some pictures of what it looks like at Kinsner Elementary. You can see there's a fourth grade classroom where the desks are 4 feet apart. The students are ready to learn. We have one of our classrooms was displaced due to the size of the classroom and the amount of students. And finally, I want to highlight down here, that's Alyssa Lepner's kindergarten classroom. She has dots around the classroom where students are able to get up, have a movement break. So the students get a movement break. She provides instruction for them, and it's just a great little strategy. Moving on to the next slide, I also want to talk about the collaborative efforts of our adults. Again, we need to commend our teachers for the tireless efforts they put in to provide a premier education for our students. How are they doing that? Through regular grade level meetings, our teachers are meeting together to map out the trimester. So for a quick example, it might be on a Google Meet, but all of our kindergarten teachers will come together, discuss instructional strategies, and as well as mapping out the assessments and the curriculum for the trimester. After that, weekly TBT meetings where teachers, again, come together to discuss and map out the rest of the week. In fact, I have to say, I give my second grade team a shout out because it's very typical that on Fridays at 4 o'clock they're ordering pizza and they're staying late to plan for the next week. And we're also sharing at our staff meetings. I try to put in a tech time during our staff meetings where we get to share some of the technology that we're using within our classroom. Last but not least, one of the challenges that we're having is that, in a typical year, we can't necessarily replicate all the same exact learning experiences and practices that we're typically used to. So what I'm talking about is we can't do small groups. We can't do carpet time. We can't do really pull kids, have those collaborative learning environments. And we're missing out on that hidden curriculum of socialization and really getting to get to know each other and build that classroom community. So here's just two pictures. One picture is of how one teacher is able to replicate that learning environment that we've had in the past, but a really cool strategy that Mrs. Kramer and Mrs. Cooney at Kinsner, as well as Katie Hawk does, they actually meet with students on Google Meet. So when they want to have a targeted intervention with a small group of students, they will have students get out their Chromebooks, she'll call them back on a Google Meet, and it allows for her to have somewhat of that same atmosphere that we would typically have in an in-person, pre-COVID, hopefully post-COVID environment. So, any questions at all? Great.
So at Muraski, it's been more of the same, and I can't say enough about our students and also our staff and what they've done to adapt and adjust and change in the time of this pandemic. And one thing I really wanted to highlight was the challenge of having to connect students who are either isolated or quarantined to the school and to their classroom. Gone are the days where a student can go 5 or 10 days outside of school and have to keep up with instruction and content, and then come back and have to make up everything that they've already missed. And that was a challenge that's presented us at the beginning of the year. And I've been so proud of our students and also so proud of our teachers, because they approached me and said, you know what, we've learned these Google Meets, and it's a great platform to connect with kids. I'd like to live stream my students into the classroom. So if you go on to the next slide here, what it's done is created authentic connection for our kids to their classrooms. So if you're out 5 or 7 or 10 days because you've been exposed or isolated or just in quarantine, you still have the ability to continue your learning with your classmates. Teachers are opening up a Google Meet, and you are live streaming. You're able to participate in discussion, hear what the teacher has to say and the clarification and the questions they ask. You get to see what they present to the students on their screen. So there is no break in learning, even though students are away from the classroom for several days. So that connection is key. It continues to build and address the social emotional concern that you've heard other administrators talk about here. And it gives students the opportunity to participate in class, get feedback from their teachers with immediacy, and also it gives that asynchronous opportunity for learning because of our recording of videos and really just accessing the curriculum even from a remote setting. I've also be remiss to not highlight our SES Connects program. 3 classrooms, 3 grade levels are housed at Muraski, and I think I can speak for Chapman and Sarar, who are housing the other grade levels. SES Connects program has been a phenomenal program to do more of the same. Students are able to connect with classrooms and teachers throughout the duration of a school day. There's opportunities for collaboration and working in small groups through Google Meets, through our breakout room features, and there's constant dialogue, and some of the Model Mustang competencies we talk about here at Strongsville, we can continue for students that are even at home. So it's been a really, really nice experience. That's some of the great technology that our district has provided our classrooms, and you can see students kind of interacting with the teacher and also interacting with the class. That's one of our phenomenal teachers, Mrs. Northeim, who's leading a Kindergartner Connects classroom. Here's some more pictures, and again, it just highlights the interaction and engagement that our students that are at home get that classroom experience. I was actually on the phone with a parent recently, and she said, you know what, since SES Connect started, there's been challenges. It's still bumpy because we're still learning a new program, but you know what, my son feels connected to a classroom. And that meant the world to me, because some of our students who are isolated and experiencing the anxiety that Ms. Surso talked about get the opportunity to feel connected to a classroom and a part of a school. So that's been a huge bright spot for our students, but for me it's also a bright spot because our staff has had to adapt, adjust, give up some time to plan and work together. You see Mrs. Puma there, who is a part of Mrs. Northeim's classroom, and they collaborate daily to make sure we're providing that premier education for our kids. So kudos to the teachers and kudos to the kids, because they're doing such a phenomenal job in such a different educational environment. The one challenge, just before I go on, that we're seeing is some of our classrooms are at capacity. Our 4th and 5th grade are challenged with spacing, and when you have space or limited space and aid support that comes in, and intervention specialists and encore teachers that are providing instruction to our students, limited space creates a problem in our classroom. So we're still trying to figure out how to adjust to that and adapt, but it is a challenge that we face every day. And it goes back to finding some strategies like Steve talked about a little bit earlier, is how can we still continue to provide our students with quality instruction, individualized and small group instruction with very limited space. And it's a challenge in our 4th and 5th grade classrooms, but we'll continue to work to provide our students with a premier education.
Thank you, Mike. So unfortunately, Dr. Razzo had a last-minute conflict that came up, and I know she's disappointed she couldn't be with us tonight, but she was nice enough to do a quick video to share what's going on at Sarar. So we're going to make sure. Hold on, let me check the sound here. Helps if I'm not muted. All right, let's see.
I'm the principal over
All right, so Mr. Binkley, can you turn that, or whoever, George, you have the remote over there, can you turn it up a little bit? All right, let's see.
Good evening. My name is Sally Razzo. I'm the principal over at Sarar Elementary School. I'm sorry that I can't be there in person today. However, I do want to take the opportunity to thank our staff. They have risen to the occasion. They have met every challenge along the way, prepared to teach virtually, prepared to teach hybrid, prepared to teach in person. They've not given up. They've formed relationships with our students, our families, and communities, and they've remained invested in what they do this entire time. Without our staff, we couldn't do what we do every day, so I truly appreciate them and thank them for all that they do and their commitment. I want to share some challenges that we've experienced during this pandemic, and one of them has been specials inside the classrooms. We wanted to limit movement in the hallway, so we asked our special areas teachers to go into the classroom to teach their content. It's very difficult to teach art, music, and gym inside of a classroom where there's desks. You can't play football, you can't learn skills for volleyball, so they really had to think outside the box and teach our students these skills using different materials. In art class, students look forward to certain projects and working with certain materials. Our art teacher had to change that up because you can't use clay in the general ed classroom. It's very messy, you need places to store it, things like that. In music, kids sing loudly. They enjoy singing. The music is loud, which disrupts other people next to you or outside in the hallway. You can hear that in the hallway when you walk through. You can hear it in other classrooms. So there has been some challenges. One challenge that was shared with me that I never really thought of was the fact that it was physically draining on some of them because they had to keep going back to their classrooms for new materials, different materials for different classes. Sometimes they would forget it, so they would have to change up what they were doing or didn't have enough of the material. So they really had to pre-plan, and sometimes, plans don't always work out, and that was not only added to their stress level, it was just demanding on everything that they did. Fortunately, we've been able to put our PE back into the gym, as well as have art go back into the classroom so students could get back to a little bit more of a sense of normal. Music is still in the classroom, so that is still a challenge, but art and PE are back in there now, so hopefully we can remain that way. Some of the celebrations that we've had are our traditions that we've kept alive and still involved with the community. As you know, elementary school, they like to celebrate the various holidays, Veterans Day, open house, things like that. We just had to find a new way to do things. So instead of having a Valentine's Day party and parade, which we usually do, and our parents usually go outside and line the parade route, we get to share our costumes. This year, we shared out pictures and videos with the families. For Veterans Day, we usually invite veterans in for different activities in the morning, maybe breakfast or muffins, and our choir sings. But this year we couldn't do that. So we had to record different videos, show our appreciation to our veterans in a different way. Some feedback that I got from the community, though, was that they really appreciated that because they could send our appreciation to their family members who lived in different states. So I thought that was pretty neat that families were sending out videos or whatever we sent them in the newsletter to their other family members who wouldn't necessarily be able to make it to Ohio to join us for these appreciation activities. We also redid our open house, which many parents liked because they could access the videos after our quote-unquote normal open house date would be, and they could go back and review things that they missed. So that was appreciated by them. You can see here some pictures of the various activities. Another one we did here was band and orchestra still had the show go on. They had their concert virtually, which got to be shared out with our whole entire school, as well as all of our parents. So every parent and every child had the opportunity to see and hear how far our band and orchestra has come since the beginning of the year. I think that we've found some new ways to do things, which is awesome. We really had to think outside the box and get creative. And we've adapted some new traditions. So I really look forward to continuing to learn and grow and find new ways of doing things. so that we can continue to keep our community involved. Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Glenn Stacco, the principal at Whitney, if you want to go ahead to the slide. So I focused on some of the strengths, and this is exciting for me because I am not a technology native. I'm definitely a technology immigrant, and I have a lot of staff that were in that same place. And so the pandemic sort of forced people to explore and get comfortable with new ways of providing educational experiences for kids. So just a few highlights here. That they're still using, even though we're back in the classroom now, because they had to learn how to use these in remote, they found that they're an excellent tool to use for individualizing instruction for our students. So ScootPad is it's available in math, ELA, spelling, and ebooks. It's standards-based, and it gives kids individualized targeted practice. So a teacher can go in there, assign a student a certain level that they need to be working at, and kids can be working independently while instruction's going on for other students. Pear Deck is a tool that is used by the whole district with interactive Google Slides. So kids can make those to do presentations, to give their feedback about the lessons, can be used for assessments. Kami is a way for students to edit uploaded documents. So in the beginning, there was a lot of, in the spring we had to make all these paper copies because kids were having trouble with how to turn in work. Well, Kami allows students to take an uploaded document that the teacher puts out there, and then they can write right on it. They can edit it and then resubmit it. So instead of having to print something out and then show it or take a picture of it, they're able to just edit the uploaded documents right there. Jamboard, a lot of teachers at the beginning were having kids, use paper, and so they were asking questions and they were holding up their paper to the screen so teachers could do some formative assessment. Jamboard is a virtual whiteboard, so in Google Meets, the kids all can give their answers through that process. Gizmo is something that I had the good fortune to observe just recently in a science classroom. It is a really awesome tool with interactive science. It's problem-solve based, very high rigor, and again, it's student-led, where they can go through the process at their own pace. The teacher can set things up so that different kids have different experiences within there, and then there's all kinds of responses available through Gizmo. And then Kahoot is something that we've actually used at administrative meetings, but a lot of teachers are just learning how to use it. It's a game-based kind of thing. After direct instruction is done, all the kids can be logged on, questions can be asked, and instantaneously they give their answer. And at a glance, the teacher can know, is the majority of the class getting this? Are we not getting it? Just based on that immediate feedback. As far as challenges, we talked a lot about engagement and the things with SES Connects and Google Classroom. But one of the challenges I think we've all faced is we have students at home that either have parents at home that are working, so they can't necessarily give their time to supervise their child when they're doing remote learning. And sadly, just by nature of the beast, we have lots of students at home alone. And even at the elementary, that's really hard. I mean, it's a different world. Back when I was a kid, we were home alone and it wasn't a big deal. Now it's a little harder. There's a lot of distractions. There's a lot of things that kids can get into, more so than they did, in the day. And so one of the challenges is for those students who might not have anybody home to supervise, or their parent might be home but can't give them the time to supervise, keeping those students on task, not crawling into bed, not walking around the house, those kinds of things. So that's definitely been a challenge, because even your most engaging lesson, for our younger kids especially, it's really hard to keep them on if there's nobody there supervising to redirect them. Thanks.
This is not Jessica Boydum. But the next best thing, Jamie Bailey,
Yes.
our assistant principal.
Thank
at the middle
you. Good evening. I'm Jamie Bailey, the assistant principal, at Strongsville Middle School. And, Strongsville Middle School is moving beyond the challenges of the pandemic. Our students, our parents, the staff, the teachers, they've had to show a level of resiliency like we've never seen before. Our bright spot is kind of taking our challenge, which was getting our students to interact in ways that they couldn't due to some of the restrictions, and really enhancing their learning experiences. We had teachers who were doing breakout rooms no matter which learning platform we were in. So we had students in the classroom working with students who were at home to kind of build that community and the relationships. We had authentic grading policies and practices. They were doing verbal assessments and trying to have students partner with one another. So through our challenges, we were able to see a lot of successes. We also saw that the in-person experiences and the tools that the teachers learned have enhanced the classrooms every single day. Moving forward, now that we're back into a new semester, we're taking the motivating factor of how will you roar? And we've introduced to our students that our roar is how we respond, how we advance, how we work with others, and then how we reflect. At the middle school, it's a very critical age of students trying to figure out who they are as students, move forward into the next chapter as high schoolers, and how we can all provide them the best opportunities to be as successful as they can be. So as we respond, we take all of the events that happen in our lives, the obstacles, the challenges, and the opportunities. How we respond to those gives us the outcomes that we desire. At middle school, we're really working on advancing the students. How can we move them forward? How can we keep them progressing? How can we give them the tools that they need to be successful? Working with others. We spoke to them about how, you tend to work with your peers or you ask your teachers for help. But think about other ways that you can think about your community of people, your parent support, your coaching support. How can you really work with one another to build yourself up and to get to a common goal? And then reflecting. Be reflective. We're trying to tell the students that this is the way that we grow. We think about, what do we need to do to improve? What should we try a little bit harder at? How can we really make ourselves the best version of us? We say every single day on our announcements, be the best at SMS, and we really feel that moving forward, our staff, our students, we're all working together as one community to really do that. So thank you.
Good evening. Hope everyone's doing well. So I'm going to just I don't want to define all the different things that the high school are doing, because I think Glenn did a great job of kind of outlining the different programs. So I'll kind of hit upon how it's changed the way the classroom experience is. So I think the thing that I'm the most proud of this fall has been the large number of staff who have, when Dr. Ryba asked me about this question, I thought, we have a lot of people who have grown more than a year in the last 4 months, right? Necessity is the mother of invention. You have no choice. So taking the programs that Glenn kind of outlined for you, it has changed the learning experience for a lot of our kids. This is from a PD from our career tech department, and all of our departments did these presentations, and we asked them, tell us what you've done differently. What have you learned? What have you used this year so far? And most of them provided really amazing presentations. So coming from them, they did things like worked on the Mustang model through, this is an example of Mr. Castle, assistant principal, speaking to a classroom. Go to the next. They were talking about using Kami to backwards design lessons so that kids were sharing. Go ahead. Pear Deck is another one that we use a lot. And I know you've heard these before, and I don't want to get into the weeds of what this means, but what it means is that kids are at home doing things as close to being here. I personally think being in school is top. I'm not going to say it's as good, because I don't believe it. I have 2 kids at home, one trying to learn pre-calculus, hitting her head on the wall when she can't ask the teacher a question. But what I have seen is teachers working with kids. I'll give you an example. I was in Mrs. Scott's honors geometry class the other day doing an observation. She was using a program called Desmos, which is they were drawing parabolas, and then they were drawing shapes and mathematically proving that the shape was what they said it was, which I think like a rhombus or a trapezoid. And the really cool thing about it was the kids at home could see the shape. The kids at the table could see the shape. The 2 kids then interacted and debated and voted electronically And then they had to provide mathematical proof on an overhead that both sides could see. She actually asked for some of her room to be rewired to do this. And I use that as an exemplar example that the kids, the students in her honors geometry class got probably, I consider that a college level experience. It's been a long time since I've been in that level of college. Certainly back then we weren't using electronics, but the experience that they're receiving in that class is college level. And I think there's one more. And, and I just put these up here, but this is not, there's a lot more than this. Desmos is one I don't think you've heard. That's a math program. And the experience that our kids are getting through this, I saw AP Physics lab. It was a simulation where the kids could see the lab at a desk, one at home, one here. So I take great pride in the fact that our staff has come a long way, and they've certainly progressed more than 4 months. Challenges. So the challenges up to this point with virtual are at-risk kids who are maybe not, we wouldn't want to say that teenagers aren't always totally motivated, but it can be a challenge if kids who are, say, in co-taught environments, that getting them to log in and not pull a blanket over their head. It does happen. It's minimal, but it's a challenge. And the challenge moving forward, for those of you who came to visit the high school, is space. The high school is a lot of kids. The hallways have a lot of kids in them. I believe we have problem solved these issues very creatively in some cases. And I know that the one thing I lose a little bit every day, I'd say hair, but that's no chance on that. But I lose a little bit every day about lunch, right? Because that's the one time of the day where they have to take their mask off. So we are still using an auxiliary lunchroom to minimize that risk. But that's probably our big, and some of you visited like our foreign language rooms where the teachers are in a weird spot. Just some nuances that I believe we've problem solved to minimize risk as much as possible.
Any questions from the board or feedback from the board or at this time?
I don't have a question per se, but I don't want to lose the opportunity to say thank you. We appreciate you all of you taking an evening out of your week to join us for our board meeting. It's important, not just for the board to hear this information, but it's important for the public and the parents watching at home to hear this information. But to say thank you, I look at all of you and I see you as representatives of all the staff behind you, the teachers, the custodial staff, the OPSI staff, all working together to make this possible. We had a lot of options to how we were going to respond to the challenge, but the option we chose is to try to do the best we can for our students. So I wanted to take the opportunity to thank everyone for their efforts. It doesn't go unnoticed.
Thank you, Mr. Micko. And I just want to echo, I think you're all phenomenal. I'm so proud to work with you and be a colleague of yours. Just to think 10 months ago, that this is how far we've come. This is a huge amount of growth and gain, with your leadership, with our teachers that have stretched themselves and pushed themselves. And, we talk about, the time and energy and the hours that people are putting in. It's been insurmountable what people have done for the best interests of our students. Now, I know today we were academically focused, but we're able to do this because we have a custodial crew that takes pride in the work and making sure our buildings are disinfected and cleaned and safe. We have a food service program that no matter which model we're in, they're feeding kids and serving kids and looking at things in a new and unique way. Our bus drivers managing kids in classrooms in enclosed space. A bus is even more enclosed and doing the disinfection protocols, keeping our kids safe, keeping them as distant as they could, all the way to our secretaries and aides and our technology department that has kept this all running and the trainings that have been done. I'm so proud of the work that we've done in 10 months. I think what I'm most proud about is where we've stumbled. Because we've picked ourselves up and we've got better results because of those stumbles that we went through. Would it have been great not to have to go through them? Absolutely. But the idea of could we have had a mediocre idea that could have gone through and been okay? Or could we have gone through that stumble, fallen down a little bit, picked ourselves up and have some phenomenal ideas and phenomenal things that are going to benefit kids long term? I think we've heard those tonight, and I think that's what I'm proud of. It's exciting for me, and I know Jessica and Jamie and Bill and all of our principals that on Monday all of our kids will be back. All of our kids that want to be in school have that option. And the thing that I can say with complete confidence and pride is, and the kids and the families that choose not to be in school, they are having an option that gets them as close as we possibly can to that experience while staying safely at home. And so not that we still don't have room to go or places to evolve, but where we've come since January, you know, sometimes myself included, we talked about we don't stop and celebrate and acknowledge how far we've come. And I'd just like to acknowledge everybody here and all of our teachers and staff and other administrative team members. We've got a lot of administrators that aren't able to be here tonight. We talked about other coordinators, assistant principals, supervisors. They're all an integral part of this. So thank you. Thank you for taking time away from your family. We're going to continue and talk about contact tracing, which you're all experts on. So feel free to, at this time, go and be with your families. I appreciate the time tonight.
You don't have to leave.
And as we talked about last time, you know, one of the parts of feedback we got from the survey was just clarity on contact tracing. And so it was suggested, a good suggestion to kind of go through a mock sample of how that works, a procedure. So I'm going to turn it over to Jenny, who's going to do that for us.
Thank you, Dr. Ryba. So,
Get the air down.
there we go. So, you know, I know Dr. Ryba just talked about the time that they spend on contact tracing. The principals are an integral part of this, and it does take a lot of time. But I feel like, you know, we're doing a really good job. And why I say that is because we have, you know, multiple people working on this, double checking, triple checking, making sure things are correct, making sure we're getting the right information from the people that we need it from, and then triple checking all of our work to make sure we're all on the same page. So I feel like we're doing a very thorough job, and I'm proud of how we've handled this. We're going to have cases. We're going to have positive cases. We knew that. We're going to have quarantines. We knew that too, but I think we've handled it well. So I just want to clarify some things because as Dr. Ryba said in the feedback, there were some questions, so I'm going to go through those at the end, and then I'll take you through a sample of how we go through it. So I just want to remind everybody of some of our protocols and our procedures that we do have in place to keep people safe, and this goes for all of our adults and our students. So obviously, we're all wearing masks. That's a rule. We wear our masks all the time. And there are some exceptions. You know, I'll point to the elementary, for example. If they're eating in their classrooms, which they are, they do take their masks off to eat. Or, you know, you take a drink, you take it off. Athletic, active participation in our athletic programs. We're not wearing masks while we're practicing and playing. But again, the rules are as you're exiting, as you're getting in your cars, you're putting those back on. Because yes, you still could be quarantined while wearing a mask, but the chances of you actually getting COVID, it's protecting you. So it's a layer of protection. And so as you heard from the principals, kids, adults, we're all getting much, much better at wearing it. Social distancing, again, the rule is maintain at least 6 feet distance apart. So, you know, we're creatures of habit. Sometimes we forget. Sometimes, you know, somebody might be at the copier and we walk up and we start to have a conversation, but we always have to remind each other, back up, you know, make sure we have that space, because as long as you're at least 6 feet apart, you're not going to be labeled a direct contact should somebody become positive. The new rule that we just put into place back in December is that when you're in the classroom or on the bus and you're at least 3 feet apart, as long as it's a classroom setting or the bus and both people are wearing masks appropriately, you do not need to be quarantined and labeled a direct contact. You're still labeled a direct contact. And the only privileges you have is to come to school. So you're still quarantined, which means you shouldn't be going to athletic events, you shouldn't be going out, you should still be quarantined, but you do have privileges to come to school. And that's only if you're in the classroom. And the thought is, you know, it's structured, we're making sure the rules are being followed. And so we've had that happen a little bit already, that, you know, students that would have needed to be quarantined did not have to quarantine. Hand washing is another one. You know, upon arrival to school and work, we encourage hand washing. Before and after eating is important because you're touching your face and that. Obviously, after the restroom, that should be always, all the time. And if you can't hand wash, and that's the best thing, if you can't do that, then hand sanitizer is good. And then obviously, anytime your hands feel dirty, any other time you would want to wash your hands as well. Sanitization and cleaning, can't thank our custodial staff enough, all of the extra things and the extra efforts they're putting in to make sure that things are cleaned. Clean throughout the day. They regularly are going through and sanitizing, which means they have, electrostatic sprayers, right, Steve? That's is that what they're called? Yes. So they're spraying, so they're sanitizing. They might not necessarily be cleaning every time, which means wiping things down if something gets dirty, but they are spraying so that we're sanitizing the areas. Definitely high-touch surfaces, so railings, door handles, everything that people touch regularly is being cleaned multiple times. And then every evening, after the lunch periods, especially with the tables and the masks are off there, so that's very important. And then anytime we know of a case or we know of a possible symptomatic person that was in a classroom, in an office area, we are making sure we do a deeper clean there. I know here we have sprayers and rags in all of our offices that we can use to clean periodically if the custodian isn't there, and all of the buildings have the same thing. So that is a priority to us as well. And then finally, we have a partnership with the Cuyahoga County Board of Health. We contact them probably daily. Our contact there, we exchange cell phones, we text with questions constantly. If there's a case that we're unsure about, or it's close, or the dates might be a little off, we'll contact them directly and work with them. And so we also share any positive case we give a line list to, which means we have to indicate who was positive, their name, their phone number, all the directory information. And then from there, we also list any direct contacts. So ideally, they should be contact tracing, but because of the volume of cases and people, we basically share that with them. They verify it. They may follow up and call people to see how they're doing, but at least they have all of the information. And so they've been a great partner for us and really have helped guide our decision making. Any questions on the protocols or procedures? Okay. So I'm going to take you through a case. I'm going to try to be as succinct and clear as possible because it can be very confusing. And the one thing that I've learned by contact tracing is that, yes, it would be easy to send out a form, fill out these questions, and I get the information and I do whatever I do. As you ask more questions to people, because, this is an emotional thing. It's scary. If your child or you are diagnosed with COVID, you're just a little nervous. What's going to happen to me? How is this going to impact me? And so sometimes we're not thinking clearly. So we have to ask questions over and over. I've asked questions of, when did your symptoms begin? Well, I think it was yesterday. Well, maybe it was the day before. Wait, let me check. When did so you're trying to think back a couple days. So it does take some questions and going through that with each person. So this is an example of a positive case. I just did an elementary example here. And so let's say on Saturday, somebody, a student, I'll go with a student right now, gets symptoms. Their symptoms begin on Saturday. On Sunday, they decide, I'm going to go get tested because my symptoms are not improving. On Monday, we get to school and we get this report that this student is now positive. They get the results and they're positive. And results are coming a little quicker, by the way. Sometimes it's 6-12 hours with a PCR test, which is the one we recommend. And so that's good. Sometimes it still does take a few days to get the results. But so we get the results. This is a good one. We get the results early, and there's a positive case reported. People know they're doing the right thing, and students are staying home. So this student is at home already, doesn't come to school on Monday. So what we begin to do then is to think, okay, what are the direct contacts of this child that was in class, and this student was in class on Friday. Symptoms began on Saturday. What we have to do is think back to 2 days prior. So we're looking at Friday and we're looking at Thursday. And so this is what I mean when you're asking people questions. Were you with them? Were you wearing a mask? How far apart were you? So we really have to think. And so From the principal's perspective, they're going in classrooms, they're measuring spaces. They're calling parents, they're talking, they're asking these questions, and along with our district nurse and school nurses, to make sure we're getting all of the correct information. And so on Monday, we would begin that contact tracing. Again, like I said, you go back to Thursday and Friday. We're looking at the classroom. We're looking at the bus. We're looking at recess. We're looking at any other classes. Sometimes kids break off and they go to different groups, or they might have gone to speech, or they are with different people. So we have to look at all of that and make sure we're contact tracing appropriately. So I gave 5 possibilities here of contacts that we would say, okay, these people are direct contacts. Less than 6 feet, longer than 15 minutes is the rule. And the 15 minutes is a total of 15 minutes within a 24-hour period in one day. So it's not, I wasn't with them. A lot of people say, oh, no, I wasn't with them for 15 minutes. Well, were you with them for 3 minutes here and 4 minutes there and 5 minutes here? And well, yeah, well, then it's close to 15 minutes. And by the way, these rules, COVID doesn't say, 6 feet, I'm stopping, 15 minutes, I'm stopping. A lot of this sometimes depends on, were you both wearing masks? Was the person symptomatic? Were they coughing? So some of those things do come into play when we label somebody a direct contact. So basically we do this. These are the 5 people that we would say would be direct contacts. And remember, you're still a direct contact, but you might not have to quarantine. So the next slide then is the dates that we would assign for isolation. So remember, if the date that the symptoms began was the 23rd for this positive case, January 23rd, you start the isolation dates the next day. And sometimes we start them on the day of symptoms if you woke up at 6 a.m. and got the symptoms then and had a lot of symptoms. But if you start to feel a headache at 7 o'clock at night on the 23rd, we're going to start your first day on the 24th. And so you are isolated for 10 days. Isolated means that you should be isolated in your home, in a bedroom, not around other people. If somebody needs to bring you food, they wear a mask, they go, quickly, and they exit. And so this person would be isolated for the 24th through the 2nd, and they could return to school on the 3rd. For the direct contacts then, it depends. Was Thursday the last day of contact with the person that was positive, or was Friday the last day? So we got to figure that out. So the reason I have, bus, same seat, that's less than 3 feet apart. If you remember, I said the bus now you might not have to be quarantined. But if you're sitting in the same seat as somebody else, you're not 3 feet apart. And so yes, you would still need to quarantine there. If you're sitting 2 seats behind somebody, no longer need to quarantine, because you're at least 3 feet. So there's a classmate, 5 feet apart, They went to maybe a small group, but they sat 5 feet apart. As you saw in some of those pictures, some of our desks are 5 feet apart. It's more than 3 feet. They were both wearing masks, didn't eat lunch together. So that person, yes, is a direct contact, yes, needs to quarantine, but not from school. They can come to school. Lunch, taking masks down, eating, not wearing masks, even though they're 5 feet apart, they would still need to quarantine and not be at school because of that. The teachers try to maintain at least 6 feet, but with elementary, sometimes that's a little more challenging. They may be going around and helping students. So again, 4 feet, more than 3 feet, wearing masks, that's okay. Don't have to quarantine from school. And then recess buddy. Recess is a challenge. Who did you play with? Who were you hanging out with? Even though you're wearing masks, maybe you're walking around together or playing something, so that person would need to be quarantined. Maybe they played with somebody on Thursday, somebody different on Friday. We're trying to maintain same groups, but sometimes that's not the case. So the 2 examples I gave of these dates are, some people might be the 22nd to the 31st, some may be the 23rd, depending if they had their last date of contact. So if you have contact with somebody, the very next day is when you start your 10-day isolation. Any questions on that scenario? Okay. Make sure I didn't miss anything. Oh, yeah. Again, just one clarification. The difference between a quarantine and an isolation is, quarantine is you just have to be really careful, not be around people, stay at home. You can still be within your house. Just be aware. And if you ever start to feel symptoms, that's when we need to know again. And most people do follow up with us. Isolation, again, is on your own. And by the way, whether you have to quarantine from school or not, we will contact you, we will send letters to you, we communicate with you. Our principals do a phenomenal job, and our nurses, of actually calling and talking to people, because like I said before, a lot of people have a lot of questions. So secondary is very similar to the elementary. I won't take you through all of that, but just know that the volume is more. So, there's multiple classes we have to go back. We have to rely on, sometimes a teenager to remember, okay, the seating charts from the class, the teacher. We get all the information, so we're doing the right thing. Lunchtime for them, I was at the high school today in the cafeteria, and they're doing a great job. They're very socially distanced. Obviously, not all the kids are back, so it's a little easier. But they do a nice job wearing their masks. They sit down, they eat, and they put their masks right back on. Bus. Are they riding the bus? High school's a little different. Sometimes they ride, sometimes they don't. Sometimes they go with a friend home, so we have to consider all of that. They could have more possible outside contacts. Do they have a job? That's the employment piece. Are they working somewhere? Are they involved in an athletic group? What other extracurriculars are they doing? Because sometimes we have to look at all of that to identify direct contacts. So what happens next after we go through all of that? We verify these dates. So we verify with me, the COVID coordinator, the nurse, the athletic trainer. So our district nurse, Crystal Tackaberry, is handling all of the student side. We talk every single day, multiple times a day. I do the employee side for the most part, and our athletic trainer is handling all of the athletics and contacts with those parents. We make calls, our principals help make calls to all the direct contacts. We follow up with letters and go from there. Remember, you get a letter to the group. So if they're on the bus, that's the group. If they're in a basketball team, that's the group. You're going to get a letter for the class, to wherever the case is positive. So I know it's a lot of letters, but legally we need to send them. And then obviously to the building of a positive case. And then we send the line list to the Board of Health. So a couple of things that I just wanted to highlight. When, hopefully you don't, but if you have a positive case in your house, these are things that we need to know when you contact us. So things to kind of start to think about: the date and the time of the symptoms, when they began for the positive individual, because it's important, because as we determine dates, I need to know when they actually started. And what symptoms are present. That's helpful to know, just because we want to, determine the severity of it, how they're feeling, making sure, did you get a rapid test or a PCR test? Sometimes rapid tests aren't as accurate, and PCRs aren't 100% accurate either. If they're not symptomatic, what was the date of the test for the positive individual? So some people, the dad is positive and the child doesn't have any symptoms, but because we're nervous and we just want to know, we get a test. The child then becomes positive. So the child has no symptoms. So their first date then becomes the date of the test. We want to know the date of the test, the type of test. We always recommend the PCR test. You can get those at Southwest Hospital, CVS. Those are the ones that are the PCRs. Rapids are more at the urgent cares and urgent centers, and if you don't have symptoms, they're not always accurate. We need to know any direct contacts, so let us know who the child was with, 6 feet or longer than 15 minutes, like I said, and then the last date of direct contact with the positive individual. So, sometimes parents will call and say, I'm positive, but I've been quarantining or I've been isolating in my bedroom since Tuesday or whatever. And so we can kind of determine, because every time you're exposed to an individual that's positive again, that the timeline starts over again, because then you could develop symptoms. So I just wanted to address some common questions that we got in the feedback. So how do I know if my student is a direct contact if I don't know who's positive? So there is a need to know. We all want to be safe, and how do you know if my child or as an adult, if I wasn't with that positive case? So, again, I just went through how we contact trace. I think we're pretty thorough. Do we make mistakes? Maybe. I don't know. I think we've been pretty good. But always call us. Call us if you have a question. If you give us information, we can typically say yes or no. We just can't give people's names out and the information, but we can give you enough to hopefully make you feel comfortable. And then again, we call, we let you know. And in our letters, we've even started to say, like, you'll know by 5 o'clock if you're a direct contact, just so people can understand. If I don't get a call by 5, then I'm good. Why wasn't I contacted right away? Why is my quarantine date start 3 days ago? So in the example I gave, we didn't find out till Monday of that positive case. But yet your child had contact on Thursday. So yes, your quarantine is going to start Friday, even though I'm calling you on Monday. And so in a way, it's good because it takes a few days already off of the length of time. But I understand that there's an uneasiness, like I should have known. I would have maybe have been more careful if I would have known this. But again, the point is always be careful. Always, we need to feel like everybody has it. Why does my child need a quarantine when they have tested negative? Again, testing is not always reliable. And so what the Board of Health is recommending is that even though, at least by day 7, if you're going to probably get it, you're going to get it. And so we've shortened our quarantine to 10 days for that reason, because by day 10, you'll know, usually that and you could still develop symptoms. Why won't the district tell me who's positive? Again, we can't be sharing that information. Some people, unfortunately, they're still feeling bad that I didn't mean to do this. It's, I'm sorry. And to put names out there, we just can't share. It's a confidential thing. And then why do I need to get so many letters? Some people are like, don't send me any more letters. And I'm sorry, but we do. That's the governor's order. We do need to send those. And then last thing, I just wanted to highlight, if anybody has any questions or any follow-up, I think all 3 of us here are answering emails on the weekends, at night, in the evening, because this needs to be timely. We don't want kids coming to school who are positive or parents are unsure. Do I send them? Do I not? So my contact information is there. Crystal Tackerperry is our district nurse. And Steve Pritchard's the athletic trainer at the high school. And he does a phenomenal job reaching out to athletes and families. And there's a whole nother level with athletes, because they also, if they are positive, they also need to get a heart check. And so just to make sure that everything is okay. So with that, any questions for me?
Any questions for Jenny?
Thank you for going through all that.
So if talking about contact tracing is this involved, I think we can only imagine how much time is taken to actually do the contact tracing. But one of the comments I want to make is that, we've talked a number of times about how much time this contact tracing is taking, how much resource it's taking. I don't want the message to be misinterpreted. We are invested in doing this and doing it well. It is our way to ensure that we're balancing the risks of people spreading the COVID infection with also being reasonable of not having risks that are outsized. The quarantine time periods are based on what the different doctors are observing and coming up with best practice. I mean, certainly we could say if you're infected, you have to quarantine for 30 days. But at a certain point, it becomes unreasonable. I did want to comment, any time we make a change in our procedures, it isn't us making that decision. It is us following the CDC and the Ohio Department of Health guidelines. So when we shorten quarantine periods, it's because we get that kind of information from the different agencies to give us that flexibility. For me, it's a good segue into Monday. We're all very excited to have all of our students back in school, but it also does raise the stakes, so to speak. And the best way to minimize this is to follow the rules, to wear that mask with rigor, to, as much as possible, keep the distance, so that when we do the contact tracing, you can say with authenticity, I wasn't within 6 feet, I wasn't within 15 minutes for a day or what have you, so we can minimize the amount of additional quarantining. We're not going to minimize people getting infected. And sometimes I think just by the nature of this pandemic, there's a lot of finger pointing, what did you do wrong? nobody did anything wrong per se. You get sick, it is an infectious disease, it happens. But the behavior we take around that, and in addition to that, is what I think is important for us to convey, that if we do this well, we minimize that. And I'm just gonna, for myself, make that plea to parents, et cetera. Before the pandemic, it was common that you weighed, do you keep your child home or do you send them to school? The consequences are much larger now. If your child is not feeling well and those symptoms could be COVID, keep your child at home until we can verify that. Because sending them in and saying, well, we'll see if it gets worse or it gets better, that's where the risks have outsized consequences. And as we heard from all of our principals, we now have better tools to keep the education going, to keep children engaged remotely when they do have to stay home because they're sick or for whatever reason. So that's enough of my scope box, but I appreciate everyone's efforts, especially Jenny and her team with this, because it's important, but we do recognize it is, especially when there's a lot to do, it just is a big a time commitment. You're up, Cameron.
All right, unless nothing else on the restart? All right, so let's move on to one item for your vote, diversity training consultant from our wellness funds. Be it resolved upon my recommendation that the Board of Education approves the cost of diversity training through consultant Daniel Juday for the cost of $35,000. This professional development will be paid through the student wellness funds as found in Exhibit C.
Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Motion by Mr. Roberts, second by Mrs. Hausum. Any discussion? I know we had our first pro dev for the staff recently, and as I understand it, it was well received. And we're excited to see the training and the professional development continue. Mr. Anagnostou.
Mr. Roberts?
Yes.
Mrs. Hausum?
Yes.
Mrs. Salee? Yes. Mr. Miko?
Yes, and the motion carries.
Moving on to business services, our operations manager, Steve Bruckner.
Good evening, everyone. There's two items on this section for your consideration. The first one is transportation for non-public students. Be it resolved upon the recommendation of the superintendent that school bus transportation for the students listed in Exhibit D be declared impractical. The time and distance required to provide transportation, the cost of providing transportation in terms of equipment, maintenance, personnel, and administration, and the additional service unavoidably disrupts current transportation schedules. And be it further resolved upon the recommendation of the superintendent that the Board of Education, in lieu of providing transportation, pays parents of students attending these schools, and the reimbursement will be based on the amount allotted by the state, and again, that's Exhibit D. The second item is the bus bid. Be it resolved upon the recommendation of the superintendent that bids be accepted for 3 conventional unitized, which means complete unit, buses as received by the School Bus Cooperative Purchasing Program of the Ohio Schools Council as listed in the exhibit, and that's Exhibit E. Be it further resolved upon the recommendation of the superintendent that the bids be accepted from Myers Bus Sales and Services for 3 72-passenger conventional unitized buses for a total of $284,047 as listed in the exhibit. Funding shall be as follows: 3 72-passenger conventional unitized buses provided by permanent improvement funds in the aggregate principal amount of $284,047.
Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Motion by Mr. Roberts, second by Mrs. Hausum. Any discussion? Steve, how many buses do we have in the fleet?
Currently, we have 78 buses, and that does include spares.
And so traditionally, I know it waxes and wanes, whether we get 5 buses, 4 buses, 6 buses, or whatever. I noticed that they're longer buses or bigger buses. Is that why there's only 3?
Not necessarily. We started this trend of getting 72-passenger buses a few years ago. The reason why there's 3 is, quite frankly, our mechanics do a great job of keeping these buses on the road as long as possible. We just don't ever want to shut off the tap and not get new buses when we have such great pricing to do so. it's just going to hurt us down the road, where if we don't get 3 this year, we may have to get 6 or 7 one year because they all were deemed not able to drive by the state inspectors. So the reason why it waxes and wanes is quite simply because sometimes more buses come up for inspection and don't pass. But through working with our mechanics, especially our head mechanic Steve Vachon and Lori Sinek and Curtis Washington, the assistant and transportation directors, we're able to determine this year the best thing to do is buy 3, and that way we can keep the fleet at a good size and not waste any of that money nor shut off the tap to where it hurts us in the future.
On average, how long are we getting out of a bus nowadays?
15 years is the average.
And would you guess at how long, 10, 15 years ago we were getting them? How long we were stretching them?
I would hate to guess because this is being recorded.
I'm sorry?
It really depends on the weather some years. I would just tell you that we do so much fabrication now in-house. We've been able to get mechanics from the private sector that we're an all-in-one shop. The only thing that we ever go outside for is warranty work. Whereas 10, 15 years ago, I wasn't even here in the district at that point, but I would say that we maybe didn't have all those capabilities. They have the tools needed to keep these buses on the road as long as possible, and they do a great job with that.
So extend our thanks to them, because I know, as little as 10 years ago, we were buying and replacing buses more often. You and predecessors were coming for, we're going to auction this bus because it's not worth anything other than what we can get as an auction, or in some cases, I think I remember we were scrapping buses. So
correct.
They're doing right by the taxpayer and stretching those dollars. And for as many miles as we put on those buses, I think it's outstanding that we're getting 15 years out of them. Any other questions or discussion? George?
Mr. Roberts?
Yes.
Mrs. Hausum?
Yes.
Mrs. Salee?
Yes.
Mr. Miko?
Yes, and the motion carries.
Thank you, Steve. Next up, we have our curriculum report. Aaron?
Good evening. I have 5 items tonight for your consideration. The first one is for our middle school science textbook adoption, as shown in Exhibit F. Be it resolved upon the recommendation of the superintendent that textbooks be adopted for the middle school science as an updated copyright continuation of our current series, and again presented in Exhibit F. These materials have been recommended and reviewed by our professional staff. The second item this evening under curriculum is a student-teacher affiliation agreement. This is between John Carroll University and the Strongsville City School District, approved as presented in Exhibit G, up for your consideration. Item 3 is our Strongsville High School Program of Studies. Be it resolved upon the recommendation of the superintendent that the Strongsville High School Program of Studies for the 21-22 school year be approved. Item 4 is a school psychology internship. Be it resolved upon the recommendation of the superintendent that the following student shall be placed for the purpose of a school psychology internship. And this student teacher, I guess, or intern, will be at all of our elementary schools, Early Learning Preschool, Kinsner, Whitney, Muraski, and Sarrar, assigned to both Lindsay Arndt and Amy Hoffman, and is a student of John Carroll University. The last item tonight under curriculum is a student-teacher placement. Be it resolved upon the recommendation of the superintendent, the following student teacher shall be placed. This will be placed at Strongsville High School and Strongsville Middle School, assigned to Brian King, and a student at the University of Akron. Thank you.
Any questions for Aaron? I was going to comment, my memory, I'm getting old, it's failing. I remember at the high school, we're going to have a new program for biomedical. And then who else remembers what the other programs are? Because I'm brain hiccuping. There's the biomedical program. There's also the print media.
Media arts.
Media arts, thank you. Those were the two that are brand new programs to the high school, and I think they'll be very exciting. And There are some other minor tweaks and changes to keep everything active. I know we have a new leadership class that I think is going to be well received and helps fill some of the gaps that the ROTC program had. So there's, again, some new stuff there, but all the other stuff is important and continues to be part of our comprehensive program. I noticed when I was reading it, there's a science fiction and fantasy class, and I just read those books for fun. I could have gotten credit for them. Thank you, Aaron.
Thanks, Aaron. We have no items this month for student services, and now I'll turn it back over to Jenny for human resources.
Thank you. I have the following items for your consideration under Human Resources. Under E1, resignation of a certificated staff. Under E2, a retirement for 2 certificated staff members. Thank them for, especially Deb Brigizzi, who's retiring February 26th. She's been with the district for a long time, and definitely wish her well, and hopefully whatever sort of celebration we can have in May will recognize both Debbie and Lynn at that. Under E3, appointments for certificated staff, appointments for non-certificated staff, appointments for certificated permanent building substitutes, and appointments for our certificated permanent building substitutes. These are contract extensions. They've been with us for the first semester as well. Appointments for certificated substitutes. We have appointments for certificated athletic supplemental contracts, appointments for non-certificated athletic supplemental contracts, appointments, under E4, stipend for a teacher-based team coach, stipend for our webmaster. Under E5, changes in hours for non-certificated staff. Under E6, changes in full-time equivalents for certificated staff. Under E7, changes in status for certificated contract extensions, changes in status for certificated supplemental contracts that are prorated. Under E8, continuing contracts for non-certificated staff. E9, medical leaves for certificated and medical leaves for non-certificated staff. Under E10, unpaid leaves for certificated staff, unpaid leaves for non-certificated staff. Under E11, volunteer coaches, and then we also have our volunteer chaperones there. And then finally, under E12, we have a resolution for substitute licensure for your consideration. Be it resolved upon the recommendation of the superintendent that the Board of Education approves a resolution authorizing employment of certain individuals granted temporary substitute licensure in accordance with House Bill 409 as stated in the exhibit. And I just wanted to add a little bit to this. So basically, I know a couple board meetings ago, somebody asked about how I could be a substitute and what they needed. And at the time, I said, well, you need at least a bachelor's degree. So this is waiving that requirement now and allowing those that may not have a bachelor's degree for us to hire them to be substitutes. So we still are going to put some parameters on this as we post this, and I'll post this out most likely tomorrow. Although you don't need to have a bachelor's degree, we do obviously want you to be at least 21 years or older. You're going to still have to go through all the background checks that we would do for any other employee. Still looking at least some experience, like what is your experience with children? Do you have some post-secondary education or maybe the equivalent? So some experience, work experience or training in that way. And then also, I did some training for some volunteers that wanted to sub, and so we're going to continue that training. They'll take all of our normal modules that we require every employee to do, but then again, I also will provide some additional training. And the thought is that some of these people, should they apply, if we have teachers that need to telework because they're under quarantine or isolation, then they could be in the classroom and assisting students. So that's, I think, where we would start them. And then maybe work up from there. So this does need a vote.
Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Motion by Mr. Roberts, second by Mrs. Hausum. Any discussion? The only comment I was going to make is obviously I think it's a good idea to give us the flexibility, especially with just the difficulty of getting subs, et cetera. So I think that's a great idea. I'd like us to monitor it, because what I anticipate is that this is temporary, and at the end of that, if we have some really good subs, we're going to want to address with the legislature in Columbus on how we keep them and allow them to continue to sub for us. Any other discussion? Mr. Anagnostou?
Mr. Roberts?
Yes.
Mrs. Hausum?
Yes.
Ms. Sully? And Mr. Miko?
Yes, and the motion carries.
We do not have any items under technology, but I do want to give a thank you and shout out to Dave and his team. As the board knows, we got a shipment of Chromebooks in right before winter break. They worked throughout winter break, they worked throughout the week back, and as far as I know, all Chromebooks are where they need to be right now, right? So the freshmen have their new Chromebooks, first and second grade classrooms have their Chromebooks back. And if that wasn't lucky enough, one of our other orders came in. So now we have our Chromebooks all set for next year's freshmen. So no matter what happens with supply chain, we're at least good to go for this year and next year. So thanks to him and his team for getting that all settled and ready to go for our students. And with that, that concludes my report.
I also want to echo my thanks and the board's thanks to Dave and his team, because we know we've put the hours in, we've put those hours in response to the pandemic. But as Cameron was talking about, responding to that challenge, we now have those tools, and we'll be able to continue to use those tools. And during the principal reports, we were able to see some of the examples. And so I know, at least for this geek, it's exciting to see the rush of technology, and I think that part of it's a good thing. So thanks, Dave. Next on our agenda is our different board reports. The first one is report on Polaris Career Center, and I will give a quick report on behalf of Michelle. Thursday, January 21st, there is a virtual Mustang night from 5:30 to 7 p.m. So if you forgot to attend, you're now almost 2 hours late. However, it does highlight that Polaris is still doing its best job to get that information out about the different high school programs. And even if you missed the virtual Mustangs night, any students or parents that are interested should reach out to their school counselors, and they'll get them that information. The neat part about these virtual nights is that you can do them again on demand. And there's some videos to give a introduction to all the different programs on the website now. So make sure to avail yourself of the information. Report on legislation. Sherry, do you have anything for us?
Yeah, I have a few things. First one, Jenny had mentioned the House Bill 409 for substitutes, and I was just looking that right now it's just for substitutes through the 2021 school year. So unless something changed, those rules only apply for that period. A couple other things, DeWine signed into law House Bill 436. It requires districts by 2023 school year to administer annual dyslexia screenings for students in grades K through 5. Want to mention, let's see, House Bill 210. DeWine signed into law House Bill 210. The bill requires preschool programs and other entities licensed by Ohio Department of Education to screen and test prospective employees for tuberculosis. Let's see. And then House Bill, DeWine signed into law Senate Bill 68. The bill requires a state model curriculum for high school students on proper interactions with peace officers during traffic stops and other encounters, and requires districts to incorporate this curriculum into at least one course required for House Bill or high school graduation. I don't know when, I don't have information on when you're going to be required to have that, but it's been signed into law. And then, let's see, a couple more. Finally, DeWine signed into law Senate Bill 10. The bill increases the penalty for theft in office when the value of stolen property or services is $150,000 or more and expands court jurisdiction. Okay, and you mentioned the substitute teaching. There was one more I want to mention. President Joe Biden announced the American Rescue Plan, a $1.9 trillion COVID-19 emergency plan that includes $130 billion for K through 12 schools, and hopefully we'll get some piece of that for our district. So, and that concludes my report for legislation.
Thank you, Sherry. Next is our board liaison reports. Laura, do you want to start with City Council?
Sure. City Council has met twice since our last report at the beginning of the month. And Rich, you had mentioned this at our last meeting. They elected Matt Schoenhut as their council president and Gordon Short as their council president pro tem. Also at that meeting, they have elected to put a 2.0 mil tax levy for May, and this will be for additional fire personnel. Then this past Tuesday, they met. Mr. Short gave a COVID update from Southwest. He said that Phase 1A at Southwest is mostly complete. They've administered over 1,800 COVID vaccines. They are getting ready for Phase 1B, which should have started by this point. This is for 80 and over this week, and starting on the 25th will be for 75 and older. Something to note is that Drug Mart and Giant Eagle will be able to administer those COVID vaccines. On Monday, this coming Monday, I'm sorry, the date, there will be a economic development meeting in council chambers. And that concludes my report for council.
Do you have a Education Foundation report?
I have a short report for the Education Foundation. They have not had a meeting, but yesterday they released a fundraiser. They are doing Super Bowl squares. Squares are $25 each, and you can find the link on their Facebook page to purchase those squares. That concludes my report.
Excellent. Sherry, PTA Council?
I just have only one announcement. The Reflections Project program this year, which was a great turnout. We had 5 entries for that. And where the PTA Council is collecting those entries and taking the next steps to input our entries, 5 students into, into the program, or the, it's an art program, and students prepare entries for visual arts and literature. So I'm not sure when that's due, but it's a great turnout for that. 5 entries. And that concludes my report for that.
Seth, Student Achievement?
Student Achievement, just want to say congratulations to the Lady Mustangs. They're top of the GCC right now. And as we get into more of the winter sports, just want to commend all of the athletes and the coaches and thank them for all their hard work to be able to play. And obviously all the academic extracurriculars and music programs are going on as well. Just for the fact that they can continue in this throughout the pandemic is, I think, great for everybody. That concludes my report.
Thank you. Board committee reports. Finance Committee, is there any report?
No report, but we are hopefully going to meet on February 16th.
Yeah, so we finalized a schedule today for this year. So our first meeting will be February 16th, and send out the meeting notices in the next couple of days. Make the meeting public.
And if someone, so we're going to get that schedule on the website.
Correct.
So if anyone's interested, not just in the February 16th, but all the meetings throughout the year, they can refer to the board portion of the website and get the calendar for all the meetings.
Right. The meeting time is 6 o'clock.
6 o'clock, and it is in the admin building.
Yeah, in the media center.
Policy Committee, our next meeting is to be announced. We do have some policies up for second reading. Facilities Committee.
Our next meeting is at the end of this month, January 28th at 6:30 here in the admin building.
and the Business Advisory Council. Other than next meeting to be announced, wait for good news from them. Next on our agenda is consent calendar. Next on our agenda is consent calendar. Action by the Board of Education and adoption of consent calendar at this point of the agenda means that all items appearing in this agenda with asterisks are adopted by one single motion unless requested otherwise. Do I have any requests? Hearing none, I don't remember any adjustments or addendums, so the consent calendar is as printed. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Motion by Mr. Roberts, second by Mrs. Hausum. Any discussion? Hearing none. George?
Mr. Roberts?
Yes.
Mrs. Hausum?
Yes.
Mrs. Ali? Yes. Mr. Miko?
Yes, and the motion carries. Superintendent's report on timely information.
Thank you, Mr. Miko. A couple reminders as we move into February. First of all, it is time for our winter parent-teacher conferences. Those will be virtual again. So please pay attention. The dates are up on the screen. They're on the website. Please pay attention to your principal's newsletters in terms of the dates for the elementary versus middle school versus high school, as well as the specifics as to how to schedule those virtual conferences so we can continue to partner and touch base as we move into the second half of the year. Just as a reminder, we sent this out earlier in a couple of our emails, but what I do every week is when I send out my parent update, then I send out a text saying, hey, I've given you an email update. That got some positive feedback. So if you have to opt in though, because data rates do apply or possibly based on your plan. Even though we have your cell phones in the system, you have to opt in. So all you have to do is text Y to 67587, and that will opt you in. And that we use the text feature just as reminders when we send important messages. Because no matter which program we use, no matter which email you have, it gets funneled into promotions or spam or other folders except your inbox at times. So this helps you know when messages have been sent. And another just reminder, we put it in our weekly update as well. We understand we've had free lunches and breakfast for all of our students up to this point. We are still planning on it being for the rest of this year. However, we have some families that typically rely on free or reduced lunch. And if you are eligible for a free lunch, that also gives you the possibility to be eligible for the waiving of your school fees based on federal law. So fee bills have gone out, and we're getting questions. So make sure if you would have typically qualified for the free lunch program, still apply. Check out the email. It's on the website. Gives directions on how to apply. That will help address the fees as well. If you don't apply, you have to pay fees, and if you don't pay, it will be added to your bill, and it will be there until you graduate, and where you will have to pay to have a whole lot of things released and participate in a lot of events that we want kids to participate in. So as Steve said with the buses, it's better to keep up with it. Same thing with school fees. Unfortunately, we work with a lot of families that have hundreds of dollars of school fees because things haven't been paid for a lot of years. If we pay a little bit at a time, and if families are having challenges paying some of those fees, please reach out to the treasurer's office. If you meet certain criteria, we can work with you. And last but not least, we're here to recognize you. I said there was no recognitions, but there is one. January is School Board Appreciation Month. In terms of the hours, the time, the energy, the sacrifices you've all made, and Michelle has made, who's not with us here tonight, but on behalf of everybody, our district and administrative team, just want to say thank you. Sherry, you signed up for this. You know, the rest of them got voted in before the pandemic, but you signed up for it. That's right. That's right. But thank you. It's a privilege to work with all of you. And as it says, this year's theme is building the future of public education. Well, we're definitely building a new future of what public education is going to be, and all 5 of you are integral parts to that. So I have a certificate for you to share our appreciation. So on behalf of the district and our community, thank you. And with that, I will turn it back over to you, Mr. Miko.
Thank you for the kind words, Cameron. I know we all appreciate it. Next is board policies. We have a number of policies on second reading. I know we all share my excitement for the next board meeting where we can approve these policies and put them into effect. Board of Education Other, do we have any others?
I want to mention the Diversity Council. We're entering to this next step where we have just approved today, Mr. Jude, who's going to take us to the next step of training and providing space for us to have difficult conversations. I'm looking forward to that, and you know, we started with gathering and meeting with each other and with our steering committee and our big meeting. There was a video. Is that video out on the website?
It's just internal use, yeah.
Okay, okay. So, and now next we're going to have this consultant come in and help us even further. So I'm looking forward to that.
Thank you. Any others? Hearing none, we have meeting notification. We have a regular Board of Education meeting, work session, February 4th in the admin building, a special Board of Education meeting, February 11th at 6:30 in the admin building, and a regular Board of Education meeting, February 18th, 7 p.m. in the admin building. We do have reason for executive session on the topics of
To consider the employment and discipline of a public employee, to consider the sale of property at competitive bidding, and to prepare for and review negotiations with public employees.
any other reasons for executive session? George, take the roll.
Is there a motion?
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm ahead of the game.
So moved.
Mr. Roberts, second. Any discussion? George, take the roll.
Mr. Roberts?
Yes.
Mrs. Hausum?
Yes.
Ms. Salee?
Yes.
Mr. Miko?
Yes, we will enter into executive session at 9:05. We have no anticipation of business afterwards. Thank you, everyone, for your attention. Thank you for our staff for their attendance, and have a good week. Thank you.